The elderly king Priam had snuck into the enemy camp under the cover of night to kiss the hands of the man who, blinded by rage, had murdered his son, then triumphantly dragged his body behind his chariot. The king begged for the body of his son so that he could commend him to the gods. Achilles, the most feared warrior to ever walk the earth, was left speechless. Homer writes that even in his old age, Achilles thought the king looked like a god. His heart, so filled with vanity, pride, and hate, was moved to tears by the love of a good father. Achilles then returns the body of the king's son and calls a temporary ceasefire between the two armies, so that he may bury his boy according to his religious customs. Achilles, who had become a mindless beast, was made human again by a father's love. How is it that a man who was feared by all his enemies and moved with the grace and ferocity of an apex predator could have his entire life changed by an encounter with a good father? Kobe Bryant had just won his third straight NBA championship and was quickly becoming known as the heir apparent to Michael Jordan. But in 2003, all of that was suddenly put in jeopardy when a 19-year-old hotel clerk accused him of sexual assault. Bryant was quickly dropped by his endorsements, villainized by opposing fans, facing 25 years in prison, and his marriage was on the verge of collapsing. It was then that Bryant turned to the only support he had left in his life, his Catholic faith. And he was met by a priest who encountered him with the compassion and mercy of a loving father. Bryant said later in an interview with GQ that it was this encounter that changed everything. The case was eventually dropped, and Bryant apologized to the victim, then went to work on repairing his broken relationship with his wife and kids. Until, eventually, the news came out that Bryant and his daughter Gigi had tragically died in a helicopter crash on their way to a basketball game along with some other parents and their daughters. It was then that stories, videos, and testimonies began to pour out about what kind of man Bryant had become over the years since his court case. By all accounts, he had become a faithful and loving husband to his wife, who had remained by his side through all his sins, and a strong, affectionate, self-proclaimed girl dad to his 4 daughters, who he would pick up from school, take to games, and hold late at night when they couldn't sleep. Both Achilles and Bryant, in the height of their pride and arrogance, had become more like beasts than men. But their hearts were changed and made human again by the encounter with a loving father. Their great sins were not forgotten, but they honored the ones they hurt by changing the way they lived. For Achilles, this was a call for peace and an end to hate. For Bryant, it was becoming a man who loved, supported, and protected women, especially his own little girl, whose soul he loved so much that he woke her up early on the day they died so that they could go to Sunday Mass together before going off on a father-daughter trip later that morning. Something that meant so much to her, to know that the man beside her was a good and loving father that would be with her until the end.